right.
Great. Yeah. Should we get started?
Yeah.
All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at, and welcome to today's webinar. And we're going to be talking about the benefits of being purple, optimizing your exercises with PlexTrac and BlindSPOT. We're very fortunate to have two awesome presenters with us today. We've got Dan DeCloss, who's the founder and CEO of PlexTrac. He's got 15 years of experience in the cybersecurity industry, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about himself in just a moment. In addition, we've got Ben Finke, who's partner and director of product research and development at OnDefend. And Ben also leads the development of the BlindSPOT tool and the simulation content within that platform. And I'll also let Ben tell you a little bit more about his experience. So yeah, Dan, do you want to go first and share a little bit more about your background with the audience?
Yeah, thanks. And actually, I'll introduce Angie for the PlexTrac community. Angie is our director of marketing, and she joined us in the summer and just doing a fantastic job. So you'll be seeing more of her around as we do events and things like that. So thanks, Angie, for the intros, and we're excited about the session today. Obviously, a passion of all of ours, and so excited to kind of just share how we work closely with Ben and his team over there, and just also share with you some results of a recent survey that we conducted on behalf of the community in conjunction with the CyberRisk Alliance, the producers of SC Magazine, and that whole media group, where we surveyed a lot of people around the benefits of purple teaming and are they doing it in their environment. So we have some exciting stuff to share. But yeah, if you've met me before, I'm the founder and CEO of PlexTrac, longtime practitioner, and founded PlexTrac truly with the goal of helping everybody stay focused on the right work and getting the real security work done, so that we can continue to move the needle as threats abound and time is always limited for the defenders. So that's really our mission at its core. And then I'll pass it over to Ben.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Really excited to be here. Thank you, Dan and team. So my name is Ben Finke. If you know me from other webinars and things I've done, OnDefend provides a lot of consulting services, including penetration testing, purple team, and that kind of work. We did develop a tool called BlindSPOT, which you'll get to see a little bit of today. That is our answer to some problems we ran into when doing some of the purple team work. We've been PlexTrac customers and friends for a long time. We were some of the first folks to use the Runbooks module. In fact, I think, Dan, we were around when you guys were kind of like workshopping through how that should work, and we were really fortunate to give you some feedback on that. So we use that in our everyday purple team engagements, and really excited to talk with you about kind of where we find the most value out of doing some of this purple team work.
Yeah, we're excited because, obviously PlexTrac is the platform for data aggregation and workflow management. And then obviously, Ben and your team, you've built tooling, and you also have the services that help really with these exercises. And so you're on the front lines every day helping customers execute this. And then, they can bring that data into PlexTrac for the reporting and remediation and the trends and analytics. So that's the goal of today, is to kind of show off some of that and how we work together with partners like OnDefend, and then also just the truly like where people are finding the benefits of purple team exercises, and what does that mean, right? What does it mean to be purple teaming, and then answer some questions around like, hey, when should I start these kinds of exercises and those kinds of things. So that's, if that's what you're here for, you are in the right place. If not, bear with us, or it's
going to be good either way. Yeah,
we're going to enjoy it. We're going to have fun. Yeah. So, Angie, I think we've got a first poll or something, right?
We do, yeah, of course. We want to start by asking all of you a question. So I'm launching our poll right now. And our question is, how often does your organization conduct purple team exercises? We've got a few different options there for you. So I'll leave that open. We're starting to see some answers come through.
And Ben, but while we're getting some answers, how many, in your estimation, how many purple team exercises would you have maybe conducted in the last, say, 12 months?
Oh, that's a great question. So across unique customers, Well, so most customers are on like sort of an ongoing thing. We do a few one time, but most of them are sort of ongoing kind of engagements. Let me look real quick. I'm guessing it's probably close to about at least 80 workshops that we've done this year across. Yeah.
I think you highlight what's important too that we'll talk about is like the continuous nature of it, why that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've done for unique customers, we just crossed into, it looks like 28 unique customer bases that we've done Purple Team engagements for this year, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, I'll go ahead and end the poll. Let's see. What I'm not sure is if is it showing you? Oh, yes. Let's share the results really quickly. So over half or right at half have never done purple teaming. So you're in the right place. We've got a great session and we're going to show you how to move up that list and start purple teaming more frequently.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, that's great statistics. We like to kind of see how are people, thinking about purple teaming, and that was really the motivation for us partnering with the CyberRisk Alliance on getting a survey out in front of people of, hey, are you doing purple team exercises, and how often, or do you know what that even means? And then if you are doing these exercises, what is the value that you're finding? So as we started this survey process, we started the survey in September. Results were collected throughout to about mid-October. We got about 315 respondents, and as part of that, a third of them, so about 100 people, 100 respondents, or maybe a little bit over, felt like they had the ability to understand adversary, or their ability to understand adversary behavior is excellent. And what we interpreted, or what we defined as adversarial behavior, is somebody conducting, an APT type threat in your environment, or ransomware, right? So something where it follows in that similar attack life cycle. So this is important, right? That a third of respondents actually felt like they had a handle on how to understand what an attacker could do in their environment. And that's going to lead us into the conversation today. But some of the challenges that people were reporting is that data and analytics is siloed across teams, and not having a holistic view of the risks that are getting reported across their environment, not only from purple team exercises, but from penetration tests and from GRC assessments, those kinds of things. Everybody's always going to complain about limited resources. I think that's always going to be there, right? We always emphasize that people are limited in time, talent, and budget, right? And it's not a matter of that you don't have talent; it's just you don't have enough of it, right? And so how do we help teams really move the needle forward from a security perspective with such a limited, with such limitations? And then also that the traditional, what they're calling red blue teams, or the traditional pen testing exercises, that it's a lengthy process, right? That you go hire a penetration test, and it could take a month, maybe two, right? And then you got the reporting process, and so really by the time the report lands into the hands of the blue team, or the people responsible for fixing it, it could be months that have passed since some of that early activity. So they may not have all the logs that they might want to go look for, and all the forensic data that they might want to be able to capture. So those penetration test exercises are still very, very important, very good to be able to simulate the real world attacker, and also compliance reasons and things like that. But the benefits of being purple are, how do we know what an attacker could do right now, and how would we be able to identify the evidence that they're leaving behind in real time, or as close to real time as possible?
Yeah.
Did you have any comments there, Ben, on some of these challenges? Are you seeing that in your experience?
I was going to say, this data is fascinating to me, and I actually think 51% may be low. So many places we go and do these exercises with, we'll work with the red team initially, and then we'll say, okay, it's time to go do some validation on what logs we got. Like, oh yeah, we don't have access to any of that. I'm like, you don't? And these organizations have policies like, oh, you're the pen tester, you shouldn't be able to see the tools. I'm like, well, the whole point of you pen testing this place is to help make the defenses better. If you don't know if they detected you, how are you supposed to help give them any real information? So yeah, I totally agree with that. And that really slows down companies. I mean, a pen test is basically a scrimmage, right? If you are a sports team and all you did was scrimmage, you'd be really bad on game day, right? You need time working on fundamentals and other things, which is really where the purple team comes in my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great analogy, right?
Yeah.
So really, like, big shocker here is the solution is purple teaming, right? That of the respondents, 88% of the people that used purple teaming in their operations said that it was very effective, right? As opposed to 52% of those using just penetration testing only felt that they were very effective. So still seeing a lot of effectiveness out of pen testing and purple teaming, but if you're only doing pen testing, you're missing the boat on some very key things. Some of the respondents highlighted that they were able to identify some of the critical gaps in their security posture, right? And it helped focus on where they should inform their strategy, right? And then it also helped defend additional budget from a talent and technology perspective. We need to go hire more people because we have these gaps, right? So those were some of the key benefits. And then also, ransomware is obviously here to stay, right? And it's a big threat to anybody, right? It's not. When we talk about like advanced threat or adversarial behavior, that can sound like, oh, that's for the big guys. That's for the big financial institutions or the healthcare institutions. It's not for mom and pops on Main Street, so to speak, but it really is, right? Ransomware is indiscriminate as the size of the business or your capabilities from a technology perspective. So being able to understand that behavior and how it fits in your environment is something that everybody needs to be aware of. Mm-hmm. And then so basically, kind of one of the key outcomes of that survey was that 89% of respondents, whether they had done purple teaming or not, felt like it was going to be very important and an important part of their strategy moving forward. So they were either focused on it now or going to be implementing some form of it in the next 12 months, right? So that kind of enters in the conversation around PlexTrac, BlindSPOT, and what are the capabilities that we all have, and how do we work together on these exercises to really help these teams that are doing purple teaming be able to continue to see the improvement in their security posture in a continuous fashion, right? And I think that's one of the key benefits that everybody notices when they conduct these purple team exercises. Any thoughts there? And then we'll dive into kind of showing off the products and talking about how you conduct your exercises and what are the key value props that your customers are seeing out of those.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I'm really excited to get into this with you because I think we'll be able to really kind of show a lot of customers who just conduct pen tests are like in that 52% that you showed earlier, like, oh, we're doing great. We get really great value out of that until they see what they actually get out of a purple team engagement. They're like, whoa, they suddenly are aware that they miss a lot of things that they would otherwise, indicators that they could be keying on to identify things, outside of pen testing. And that's really fascinating. I think the 52% of people who thought red blue exercises are really effective are probably all the red teamers who think their pen tests are awesome. Like none of the blue teamers are in there with like the yes on that, right? They're like, it was okay.
Yeah, like the red teamers like, yeah, we did everything we were set out to do.
That's right. Yeah, we're super awesome. It was great.
We're really good.
Yeah.
The blue team's like, oh man, we suck. You're terrible. All right, so the kind of the plan is like we'll show you, for those of you that are not familiar with PlexTrac and particularly our Runbooks module, we'll highlight what you can do in PlexTrac, and then Ben will show off BlindSPOT and how it integrates into PlexTrac and how they're using it for their customers and their exercises, and how they're positioning BlindSPOT to really benefit their customers as well. So If you're not familiar with PlexTrac, we'll do kind of a brief intro to our Runbooks module, which is where we send our customers for those true collaborative purple teaming engagements, right? So you can build out a runbook based on any tactics and techniques. It comes pre-built with the MITRE tactics and techniques, and we're big fans of MITRE because it highlights where procedures get executed within the life cycle of the attack, right? And so it's a great nomenclature to continue to bridge the gap between the response side and the proactive side, and really help solidify where are the gaps that we have along the whole path of an attack, right? So one nice thing about PlexTrac is that you can import runbooks or emulation plans from a variety of sources. You can export them out of PlexTrac and give them to other people. You know, we're working on building a community of runbooks that people are testing out. And I think OnDefend does a great job of helping in this arena as well. But you can also import from our great friends at Scythe. I know George, I think he's on the webinar, or at least attendance today. But you know, we have a great partnership with Scythe, and so does OnDefend or BlindSPOT. And so Ben's going to highlight some of that as well. So you can go grab those community threats and bring them in and execute them and gather the results. And then you can also pull in data from the MITRE adversary emulation plans, right? And so I'll just highlight, if you were to go to the GitHub page for the Center for Threat Informed Defense, here are those emulation plans. And you know, for the demo we're going to show, you would just go grab one of these emulation plans off of their website, and in your PlexTrac instance, you would import it here. So if we're talking about APT 29, which is what I kind of want to show off today, is you would go bring that in here, and then you can go execute it. You can either go execute it manually, or you could pass it off to like Scythe or to BlindSPOT, and even like BlindSPOT. Ben, I'll let you explain how BlindSPOT actually interacts with Scythe as well. But you know, so we can go ahead and bring in this adversary emulation plan, and we can say, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to say, I think we're running it. This is the 5th run, right? I think we've ran it several times before, just as an example. And Bruce Wayne Technologies is who we're going to attribute this to. We'll go ahead and tag this with like APT 29, just so that we have some reference. In PlexTrac, if you're not aware, you know, you can tag everything, right? We utilize tags heavily, and that comes into play within the analytics. So as you begin a new engagement, you see all the procedures that you are going to execute during this engagement, right? And so you can either do this from a manual perspective, or you can execute these within an automated platform like BlindSPOT. But basically, what you're testing is like, was this successful, right? Did we execute as the red team? Did we execute these steps correctly, and did they fire on the right assets? You can add assets from the existing client database. You can add new ones, and you can specify whether that was successful on these assets as well. And overall, did we feel like, from the blue team perspective, this was a successful attack? If it was successful on the red team side, what happened on the blue team side? Did we have evidence of it? Was it forensically logged? Was it alerted, but nobody did anything with that alert, or did it actually get blocked, right? So we'll just say, hey, this was forensically logged. And then you can keep running through each procedure. And so the red and the blue team can log in interactively and collaborate throughout this whole exercise. You know, we'll go ahead and just add a couple more here just for giggles. And then once that is complete, we'll go ahead and submit the engagement, and this generates a report, right? And from here, this is where you can polish up the evidence. You can add the evidence so that the details of the report come in. I forgot to flag anything as findings, but as you come into procedures, you can see these were all the things that were executed. So you give a visibility to your customers or to your end users or the blue team, like, hey, here were the results of this engagement, you know, over time, you know, here's what we saw, and we can change some of these and modify them to actually become findings. And so we really have this reporting mechanism that allows for this more detailed view of the engagements. And really where this also comes into extreme power is in our analytics module. So if I come over to the analytics module and I want to just get the analytics on our APT 29 campaigns, we can bring this open and you can see, hey, we've ran this multiple times and here's the coverage that it has within the runbook. It's covering 10 tactics. Of the runs of that campaign, 9 findings have been generated, and those are like high risk items that need to get executed. You kind of get a bird's eye view. This is our take on the minor attack matrix, right? Because I'm of the opinion that the matrix is great, but it's getting unwieldy and from a visual perspective. Right?
Big time unwieldy. Big time.
It works, right? So like, how do we kind of visualize this, and can we drill in a little bit different fashion? So this at least gives you some perspective of like this campaign. Here are the tactics that are really emphasized in the run of this campaign. Heavily on discovery, heavily on privilege escalation and defense evasion, right? Which makes sense. Like once they're in, they want to stay there and be able to roam around and things like that. And then of the findings that were created during our campaigns, where were they focused, right? So you start to visualize your gaps, right? Like, hey, we clearly have a big gap in the discovery realm, right? So what do we need to focus and invest on? And then this is something that I really like is really that trending over time. You can see, hey, when we first executed it, here were the blue team outcomes. And as we keep cycling through, we can start to see the trends. And so ideally in this graph on the blue team outcomes, you want to see the blue getting bigger, right? That more and more of these attempts were blocked or mitigated in some fashion. And then on the red team outcomes, you can see like which ones were successful, and you want to see that successful execution going down and the failed ones going up, right? Those are the trends you want to visualize from your campaigns as you execute these run books. So I'll now hand it over to, now you see like what you do with results and how you can execute campaigns manually within PlexTrac and bringing in excellent sources of campaigns and run books from different folks and different partners. But now I'm going to pass it over to Ben, and he's going to show up BlindSPOT and then how they interact with PlexTrac as well.
Yeah, thank you. As you know, as they say, Dan, the only difference between science and screwing around is if you write it down, right? So that's the first step, is you got to write it down. Otherwise, you're just messing around. Angie, did we have another poll question we wanted to do before I dive into the demos?
We do. Yeah, we sure can.
Great.
Let's launch that right now. So let's see. Still the other one. Okay, let me grab the right one. Okay, so this one we're curious about, what's holding you back? What barriers do you have to conducting purple teaming exercises? So we've given a few choices. We may not have the choice you want, but just pick your favorite or pick the one that really is holding you back. I'll let a few more answers come in here.
Yep. While we wait for those answers, I'll tell you that a lot of these barriers were direct things that led to a lot of what you'll see in BlindSPOT here in just a second. These were things we showed up to do our first few purple team exercises like we were going to do a pen test, and it was all manual, and it was all that was still, we were using findings, I think, Dan, from PlexTrac. We didn't have run books yet, right? And so we were all ready to go, and man, did we not move as fast as we were expecting to. That was wild.
Yeah. Well, and I think when I was a security director, at a company, we got started doing this, and it's a little intimidating. And you look at like, do I invest in a product to do this, or where do we get started? And so there definitely felt like a lot of barriers, right? So like, what was the best way to do it? And did we have to kind of make some hard decisions as to like where we allocated our time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So here are the results.
Yeah.
You can see most people just feel like they don't have the resources.
Mm-hmm.
Good group feels like they don't have the knowledge, not sure where to start, don't know what to run, and don't have Cobalt Strike.
Awesome. All right.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for filling that out, everybody. So I'm going to share my screen so we can talk about BlindSPOT. I'm going to talk about some of those, I think, items that you brought up within the poll there. So when we first started executing Purple Team engagements, one of the biggest problems that we ran into was we would have, let's say we had a week to do this work with a customer. So we show up on site or, virtually as the world is now. And we would sit down and we'd have to manually execute the activity on machines. And that could take, depending on how sophisticated we want it, because you have to generate the activity, right? You've got to create the activity in the environment to then go hunt it down and figure out how they did. And it would take a long time. It would take, usually the first day was really just dedicated to generating a lot of the activity. And we ran into a bunch of problems where if we wanted to replay that activity later, it took, again, a lot of time to generate the exact TTPs. And we were at anytime you do it manually, right, there's always like little issues that pop up that weren't the same as before. So we knew we needed a quicker way to execute this activity. And we needed a way to replay it quickly without it being like, oh, we gotta take a few hours here to go recreate the activity. So we started building some of that capability ourselves. We'll also thank our friend Scythe for creating a tool that we really like. So BlindSPOT is fully integrated with both PlexTrac and Scythe. So if you have a Scythe server, we'll actually you can point our service at your Scythe server, and we will consume any campaigns that you build in Scythe, and we'll pull them in as first-class citizens in BlindSPOT. So when we started having this idea of okay, we need to be able to run these activities, and we need to be able to do it in a way that's easily repeatable, maybe even by customers, not just our team. We needed a way to get around, pesky AV and stuff, right? Because the last thing you want to do when you're on an engagement trying to test defenses is ask them to whitelist a bunch of things. So for every activity that we do inside of BlindSPOT, we give you a bunch of different ways to kick off the payload, which will result in the same automated activity, but allows you to simulate different levels of sophistication. So we start at the most basic, which is just a regular unsigned Windows 64-bit binary executable. We're going to drop this on disk and run it. There's a really great chance this is going to fail, right? I mean, just about anybody with Defender or any kind of AV, it's really bad. It's really bad news if this one works, right? But it's important to have it available to test. So we make it in here and make it available. Moving up the sophistication line, we have some application whitelisting bypass techniques. We'll use a DLL to kick that off. Similar to the XE, we're going to drop it on disk and then try to see if you can run it. You'll notice for all of these payloads, we automatically calculate essentially the IOCs for them, right? The hash values, the names of the files, and they all have their own standalone command and control domains. We like to do this because an important part of a Purple Team exercise is you're going to test tools and test a team's ability to use the tools. And so this can be a great start for a workshop where we're going to give them basically the IOCs you would get from a threat intel sharing feed, right? You're not going to get necessarily tactics. You're going to get things like this, like domains and hash values and stuff. So this is where we'll start a lot of our simulations with customers. And we also include all of the mapped items into the MITRE ATT&CK framework. As Dan mentioned, it's just a really useful way to be able to categorize activities. It certainly isn't an exhaustive list of everything an adversary could do, but it's pretty close, and it's getting better all the time. Now, when we go to do this, another problem we run into is we have these payloads available, but getting these moved around the environment can be kind of tricky. So we built our own agent, implant code that you run. It's super lightweight. It just checks in. It just runs in memory as just an executable. It is a signed binary, and it checks in and lets us know it's there and ready to run. Once it does, it sends us some basic information about the system it's running on, and it actually takes care of kicking off all of our simulations for us. So when we've picked something in that simulation library, like we were looking at a second ago, maybe even including this process injection campaign, where we'll actually inject shellcode into another process and run it that way. So we never touch disk with the simulation payload. The good news is we don't have to teach somebody on the SOC how to run a process injection mechanism. We don't have to show them how to do that. They can just come in here and literally click new campaign, fill out the information, and like we take care of the rest of it for you, right? So you're running that campaign. Our BlindSPOT implant is watching that activity, making sure that it completes on time, it cleans up after itself, a few other sort of safety things. And that gets us all like the baseline of getting us so that we can show you how you did and where you need to get better. So I'm going to show now. Do we have any questions that came in? I saw there were a few things in the chat. I'll open up one of these and we can talk a little bit about this.
Just some comments. Yeah. So I think keep going.
Great.
I would say, when you engage with a customer, I think maybe kind of coming back to some of the barriers that you see, that we've seen.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's important to highlight is that this is a way to get started, right?
Yep.
And the outcomes really help solidify, like, hey, people feel like they don't have enough resources, and this actually exemplifies it, right? Like, by the way, you're right. You don't have enough resources to be defending against the very things that will will go deeper in your network and cause the bad thing to happen, right? And so, so getting into that, I think what it helps, and I'd be curious, how often does this help your customers go get more budget or more team members as a justification? Do you see that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the second question of actually making improvement, this is one of the few opportunities doing a purple team engagement where you have 100% visibility of the attack and 100% visibility of how you responded to it. That is data that you never have in practice, right? Most places, when they try to go in for budget, will point to how many things they blocked on the firewall or at the IPS as attacks, which aren't, that's a pretty silly metric, and it's hard to know if that's anything. Whereas I think, sort of anecdotally, I would say 3/4 of the customers that we go do ongoing purple team engagement with are successful in presenting their business case as to either more people or a different tool that they need, based purely on the analytics and the data you can get out of doing a purple team. And we help visually show, here's how you did, right? And I think you're right. That's a really important thing, is like, one thing that you'll see that we talk about a lot is that it's really important for us to get the data out of this platform, because it doesn't do us any good if we run all these simulations and all these visualizations are in here. Like, you've got to get it out so you can make improvements with it. Mm-hmm. And talking about having a lack of resources, that's one of the things that we set out to do, was rather than give you just a blank access to run activity, we build this library that has all kinds of activity in it already set to go. So even if you have no idea where you should start, you can at least kick off a few campaigns and just see how we did, right? And that is something that our team manages, continuously adding to libraries. And then we'll add specific things for customers as we go on in the process. So a lot of these are sort of like the vanilla version, right? Like, they're the basic one. They might have some things in them that aren't, they're obviously not tuned to the customer, because we built them before we even knew who the customer would be. And as we get to spend more time with them, we get to show them. So a good example, we had a customer that we did some simulations for that I think initially didn't think that they were going to have to worry about like an ongoing thing. I think that we were going to come in and like rubber stamp their detections is good and go away. And the primary defense that they had was that they had blocked the use of PowerShell exe through their antivirus endpoint agent. That was it. That was really the main thing that they thought was going to like prevent any advanced activity from happening. And we showed them in like the first day, like, we just ran a campaign that used an unmanaged PowerShell as opposed to like regular PowerShell, and it like bypassed all of it and all worked correctly. And they were like, oh, like they had no idea. And that's a tough technique to teach somebody from scratch who doesn't know anything about having to be covert on an endpoint, right? But our team does that, and we have the ability. And being able to rerun these things that they could run that themselves and see the same output. And so that was really powerful there.
Yeah. It highlights where some of those gaps truly are. And it kind of brings to the forefront for the blue team. Like you said, they're educated now about, something else that they didn't really recognize, where they thought, hey, this configuration, we should be good with this kind of configuration. And that's, I think, one of the key highlights of doing this in a purple team environment, is that some of that might get lost in a pen test report, right?
Yeah, it totally does, right? And I think the big problem that we saw before we did a lot of the purple teaming, when we would show up and do the pen test and go get past whatever controls they had, is that most organizations, the way that they test whether or not something has been implemented correctly is if it doesn't break production, whatever production means. But it doesn't actually, they don't actually know if it like would actually stop the thing that they bought it for, right? They're just like, oh, we're supposed to have an EDR, so we went and bought one.
Right.
But not like,
Yeah.
not like we don't want people to like move laterally using WMI.
We check that box. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Check the box. It didn't break stuff, so it must be good.
Yeah.
So just like Dan was showing you in the PlexTrac implementation, it's really important for us to be able to categorize how you did under the defender perspective. And so we use the same terminology: blocked, alerted, logged, and the no evidence that you see in PlexTrac. We build a few infographics out of that data so that you can kind of share it. Our goal with some of these was we would, when we did some of these initially, we would end up with this like big spreadsheet of results, which, you know, we're in the middle of it. It was awesome because we were doing all these techniques and, you know, we were really vibing with like the customer team, and those engineers were really digging it. And then like a director or CISO level person walks by and they say, how's it going? We're like, great. We show them this big spreadsheet. And immediately they're like, that's not any help for me. Like, I don't understand. So our goal was like, we need to come up with a way that even if you know nothing about like detection engineering and threat hunting or any of that stuff, you can look at it and be like, oh, that's really not very good, is it? Right? Or, oh, hey, that's big improvement. And so we demonstrate that at a few places in here. So this is specific to this campaign. We run a couple of things. So this S-curve graph we really like because it fits nicely in, you know, slide decks and documents. It does use the actual time that the activity occurred on the endpoint. You can scroll in on it. So if you want to zoom in or out on something, you can. And all of the graphics you'll find in our platform are like one-click exports, so you can get it out of here. And it is API first. So everything I'm going to do here today in the interface, you can totally, and we have automated in like a customer SOAR platform, so they can schedule the work across things that they want to do, like exercising stuff in BlindSPOT, getting the data back and doing stuff with it. We generate another version of this timeline too, because we find that version, the S-curve is cool for graphic stuff, but it doesn't really help you if you're like an engineer tasked with fixing this thing. So this inverted bar graph tends to be much more helpful because in addition to having, you know, the outcome in the middle there, it also has a snippet of what the activity was. So as you're going through and trying to figure out like, what do I want to work on or how did we do, a lot more data is available in those views. Again, you can export into multiple formats to make that easy. When we come down here below, you can see the activity that was part of every activity. So each action on its own, we categorize, we collect everything like the process ID that was running it, the timestamp, the exact request we made. In this case, it was just a command line creating a scheduled task. And you can see here, scheduled task has been successfully created. Having the response in the view is really, really helpful because when we first started doing this, we just had the action, and we found that we would be working with customers and they couldn't find it in any of the logs anyplace. And so they would say something like, it must not have ran correctly. That's probably why we're not finding it. And that's always possible. But by having the output in here, you're like, no, it definitely ran. Like, you know, that worked. We're just not collecting that telemetry, and we need to figure out if that's important or not. But really, the goal of this is once you have this data together, now we can start talking about like, well, how did we expect to do against these items, right? So for example, this first item is creating a directory in your user profile on your desktop called Ryuk. Now that's weird, but it might not be malicious. And if we started recording every time somebody created a directory on their machine, we might add like double our Splunk licensing, right? Or whatever. And so now we get to think
information overload already.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Way too much information. So now we get to figure out like, is that important for us to know or not? And once we've done some workshops with the customer, like SOC team, they know like when I'm responding to an alert or an event, or I'm doing threat hunting and I'm looking on a machine, and I don't see a log that says this folder was created, that doesn't mean it wasn't created. Like I know we're not logging that data. So if I want to know that information, like what got created recently, I have to do something else to get that information. It's not going to be logged. And that's great, right? But it's all about understanding like what is expected for us, what is the right right amount of telemetry and the right amount of alerting we want to get so that we would be able to, because it may be like I would not call that a key step in preventing a Ryuk infection, right? Preventing them from creating a directory, right? There's other things down here that we're going to talk about in a minute that I think are much more important. And those are the things that we should focus on. So the goal here is we've run this once now. You'll notice we have this idea of a threshold, and that's what I was just talking about. You can set each campaign that we have in the tool. You can actually set like, what is our threshold of success? Because we recognize if there's red in a chart that you show to an executive, they almost always assume that means there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And maybe there isn't. Maybe the stuff in green that we've blocked is actually enough to have beaten this adversary. And we can say, no, we are like, this is our objective. We've hit our target here, and we're working on some other things. Once we've done some of this kind of work with customers. Oh, and I should mention everything as Dan was mentioning, we are fully integrated into PlexTrac. So all of the items that show up in there also show up in our runbook engagements here as well. And so and it's bi-directional. So as you update something in one or the other, it gets moved over. And so if you go in here and mark something as blocked in here, it'll reflect in BlindSPOT and vice versa, right? The idea is we need to get the data out and available everywhere. So if you've centralized on PlexTrac as your workflow management, that's fantastic. That's one we would recommend for sure. That way the data shows up. And so however you collaborate or work on it, the data is in sync both places, and we can figure out like what we need to do moving forward. Once we go a little bit further on this, and we've covered some other techniques, then we start getting into some interesting stuff. So you can start also applying the detection tool that generated the block, if there is one, or a log or alert. And what we really like to do is help folks figure out how to visualize how their detection pipeline works. So what we do is we take all the activities that we ran across these simulations for you. We group them where they go in the MITRE ATT&CK tactic chain, and then we start tying those events to the security tool you told us was responsible, or we found the login that was for this particular action. Then we tie that to where does the raw telemetry go for that activity. It's really important for us to be able to help you figure out where that goes. So in this case, let's say these things go directly into Splunk. Now, this is some demo data. Normally, we don't have EDR data going into a SIM, but let's just say that we do. That gives us really great intel to know, like, listen, we have a log analytic platform here that has access to all of this raw data that we can build some really great alerting on, that can do like a lot of context, and it can take into account like proxy logs along with EDR logs and some other things. And that's a great tool for us to figure out places that we can build some recommendations for customers to go build things. And then we ultimately track it where the outcome goes to in terms of blocked, logged, or alerted. For us, the most important thing here is alerted. We see some customers who will have a great process in place for notifying like the security on-call if an alert comes from the SIM. Like the service desk is keyed up. They know like a ticket gets created, they know to page somebody, and they know they have a pretty good response time there. But if there's an alert that comes out of like a system console that is not part of that SIM alert, there's a good chance that just sits until a security team member happens to check their email or happens to log into that tool. And that's a gap, right? Our whole thing here is we want to compress, I think you mentioned earlier, Dan, like our whole thing is we got to compress the timeline that an adversary can be active in our environment before we kick them out. And that's a really, really important part. It's great if at the point of enforcement, the tool works the way we want it to, which is definitely one of the things we spend a lot of time in here is helping you tune your tool. But then it's also, we've got to send telemetry back. We've got to have a team that knows how to read that telemetry to understand what that means is happening in the environment. And then how quickly can they respond to get that threat out of the environment. I'll stop there and see if we have any questions.
No, I think we've got some good stuff coming in the chat, and there's also a Q&A. I think one great thing that we'll highlight is that what BlindSPOT focuses on is that continuous assessment. It incorporates into Runbooks, and then from there, PlexTrac picks up the back half of that, right? Where we do the data aggregation across all different types of assessments, all of your reporting, and then actually which of these items are actually risk findings, right? And that's kind of like I think an important distinction that from the PlexTrac side of it, you can now assign those out to Jira tickets, to ServiceNow tickets, or even track the remediation cycle within PlexTrac. And so that's what's so fun about this integration, is that it's doing the automation, it's getting the visuals on a campaign by campaign basis, and then you're sending it over to PlexTrac to be able to focus on the actual risk remediation side of it, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah,
and even integrating with your other pen tests, right, that you guys do as well. So
as from the services side of OnDefend, we absolutely use PlexTrac as both the tool that we use to build all the reports in, the workflow management that customers have access to for them to track it down, so that we guarantee that they don't have to like email spreadsheets of findings around to try to track remediation, right? We're definitely trying to get it a little more dynamic for them. We do a couple other things I'll highlight just real quick in the tool here. You mentioned the matrix view is totally unwieldy sometimes, Dan. As you can see, in fact, you're gonna have to like scroll all around this thing like I don't know what exactly, but you can see it's all over the place here. But recognizing that there are some folks who have standardized, if they're doing this manually, there's a good chance they've used the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator tool, which is fantastic. And so again, in the effort of like, we'll get this data into your processes, however that works, we do represent the data in here, and it's based on the scoring that was inside of the what we just looked at. And you can do a one-click download, the JSON file that you can then put into the Navigator file. That's useful, obviously, for putting into the Navigator file, but there's lots of other tools that will take as input, like the JSON file you download from the ATT&CK Navigator. And so that way, like if you've got something else you want to plug this in, you can totally do that too, right? So our goal is to help like bring in activity, whether it's something that you've created yourself that we want to host for you, or like something we've built, or something that you built in a Scythe server. Again, Scythe is fully integrated. We automate the activity of like pulling that data in, letting you run it, letting you see that activity, and then putting it into something like PlexTrac so you can take action on it when you're done. I'll show you one other thing that we've done that's kind of fun. So we realized as we were dropping our own sort of implant on the devices that customers have, there's a lot of really great value that we can provide from like a pen tester's perspective on an endpoint when we're there. That isn't really like a vulnerability scan. It's not really like a finding necessarily. It just is sometimes like baseline data. And so one of the things that we make it possible in here is to run this endpoint assessment. Think of it, it's very similar to like the seatbelt projects that the SpectreOps folks released. Some of this stuff will set up so that you can have scored as like a pass-fail kind of a thing, and other things we just collect. So in this case, we want to make sure that we've got some kind of antivirus on the system. We do. It's Windows Defender, and that one also happens to use the AMSI integration. So check, that's great. We'll also talk about some stuff in here that failed. So here's some things like we expected lapse to be found on this system, and it was not. So fail that there. But then we have a bunch of stuff here that we don't even score. This is really more like creating the baseline data. So when we sit down, because our whole goal here is to figure out like as quickly as possible, how did we do? And how do we get better? Like, where do we need to get better, right? And as we're figuring out the where do we need to get better, that is like the detection engineering side of things. And as we're sitting down with customers working on things, we frequently run into questions like, so we'll be going through a persistence example, and we'll say something like, you should make sure that you notice any changes to the Windows auto runs, whether that's a registry key or a startup folder or whatever, because that's a common persistence mechanism for a piece of malware. And they'll say something like, we don't even know like what we should expect to see in there as normal, right? So there's no baseline data that the detection engineering team has access to. And that could differ based on the image that we're running on or whatever. So our goal was, if you've already deployed the BlindSPOT agent, you're running some simulations, you could also just turn on the assessment function and we'll go get that data for you. And then later when we sit down and look, like, there's like 3 major images that we push in the company, and now we have a representative sample of each, and we know exactly what the data is in here because now we collect it for you. And some of this stuff gets really long. That's why we have it accordion style. Like we do the LOLBENS cataloging of literally all the things on your system that could be used for that, because we had people ask us for this. That's a lot of data, and we're happy to provide it, but here it is, and it goes in there. And all of this can also be pushed into a PlexTrac report as a regular findings. So if a company wants to like push that in there and mark those as like a particular severity and then incorporate that into your regular remediation workflow, you can totally do that, right? Again, this wasn't intended to like necessarily call things as wrong, but if there's something that you expect to be like a baseline standard, this is a place you can use to kind of enforce. And then when you're sampling with the simulations, we can also be grabbing a lot of the configuration data at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you do this on a continuous basis, pretty much for your customers, right? And that's kind of the goal.
Yep.
And even the integration with Scythe, where you can do these campaigns on like a continuous basis, bring that data in for more visibility across the organization, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point, Dan. And because we have it all automated now in here, it takes us like just a few hours to rerun like a monthly baseline. We'll do a lot of workshops with the team. The teams, we're finding that some of our customers are able to run their own workshops without even having to have us present, which warms my heart, because that means like they don't have to wait for us to be available to do something, right? They can come in here. And one of the things we've started to release lately for some of these customers is some in the simulation library, we'll release like deep dives into very specific techniques. Let me see if I can grab one real quick here out of my list here on my development server. So here's a bunch of PowerShell payloads. You can see just PowerShell was the only one. But if I look at the threshold here, these are a whole bunch of different PowerShell commands that were initially inspired by, like, for example, stuff in the Atomic Red Team tests that we have then taken and then like put some modifications on so they're slightly different than those. And so that companies can come in here. They don't have to know how to do all this crazy stuff, but they can come and rerun this scenario, and they know that they'll get the exact activity of like what got blocked and what was allowed and what they detected and things. And so a lot of our customers who are doing this on an ongoing basis use this as really like a way for them to figure out, not just do we get like coverage that mattered, like we expect to alert on this thing, but they can also say like, we expect to get an alert on this activity in 15 minutes. So they kick the simulation off, start the stopwatch, and they make sure that they get that alert in a usable time frame so that they can find. We had one customer who identified, I mean, it sounds kind of silly. They didn't know until they ran a BlindSPOT simulation, but it turned out that their EDR tool had developed some kind of underlying problem on like the systems that ran it. And it had a backlog of data of incoming telemetry. Now, eventually it all got processed as far as we could tell, but it had a 6-hour processing delay, which is not ideal if your SLA for like an alert from like activity, like a mean time to detect is 15 minutes. 6 hours is not good. So yeah. So by being able to like sort of functionally test that stuff, we get the ability to use this as a tool tuning, and then sort of like an operational like assurance kind of a tool where like we have one customer who has a version of the agent on a lab system that runs as a daemon or an agent. So it's a service. It's always running even after reboots, and they push changes to that thing, run some simulations, make sure that everything checks out. And then that's like part of their, check the box of like, this change is approved to go to the wider fleet because we verified it didn't impact our detection capabilities on that machine. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We've got, go ahead. We're getting several questions coming in. We got 9 minutes left. Is there more? Because we can show, or if you want to show kind of like how the data, how you take this data with your customers, or even like how someone that has PlexTrac and BlindSPOT, would be able to then really start to show the remediation aspects, right? Because there was a question around, do we integrate with, I think it was ITSM and GRC platforms, right?
Oh, by all means, let's do it, because that is important, right? I mean, showing the improvement over time is the big thing. While you're pulling it up, Dan, I'll say the last thing. One of the things we're having a lot of fun with the process injection modules is we can simulate sort of like the supply chain thing, because we can specify a application running that you expect to be running in your machine that we can inject into that will suddenly get up to no good. And it's really fun. We'll do that with like one of my favorite targets actually is the Microsoft system tray icon that tells you when like Defender's turned off or not, the security system health tray. That's a lot of fun, because then when we track all the activity back, it's like the Microsoft security application that was doing all the bad stuff. So anyways.
Yeah. That's good. That's great. Yeah. So I think one thing to kind of land the plane, with this integration is that we're all focused on where are the gaps and how do we fix these how do we identify them as easily and quickly as possible, and then fix them as quickly and easily as possible, right? So we integrate with platforms like BlindSPOT to help get that automation and get the results in, and you can aggregate the data across multiple types of assessments within PlexTrac, which is what OnDefend does as well, in their engagements. So the penetration tests, risk assessments. So there was a GRC question. We have our assessments module over here that allows you to execute assessments against NIST CSF, HIPAA. You can create your own questionnaires, but that aggregates all into a single, client or a project or a business unit. And so you have the list of all the different types of reports that come in. You'll see all the different Purple Team demos that we were brought in. And so you have statistics on a per client basis, and you can also view these on an asset level where you've got all of the different findings at an asset level. And so if we were to come into one of those reports and let's just pick this one. This one was an execution of that APT 29 runbook. We identified 3 findings that came out of all those procedures that were executed in BlindSPOT or wherever. They come in here, and you see all the outcomes, and you have all that great telemetry data that Ben and his team are collecting. And then, but then you actually need to say, like, okay, well, which ones of these are actually risks, right? And so you identify these are the ones that are findings, and from there you can actually now begin to actually track these to remediation, right? You can manually do this. You can say, hey, this is in process. We're going to assign this over to Ben, and then fix this now, and so now you start to get this timeline view of where the issue is from a remediation perspective, which is an important piece of the puzzle, right? You can create a Jira ticket straight from here. We also integrate with ServiceNow. But as the remediation starts to unfold, you start to see how are things progressing over time, right? You start to get a perspective of which issues of the findings are getting closed out. And that also then bubbles into our analytics dashboard, right? So if we were to say, hey, I want to see everything related to APT 29 across multiple business units, multiple functions, we can do that. And we start to see, okay, here's the big culprits based on, something like APT 29. So you can use those tags, that tagging mechanism to really filter things down, and then get an idea of like what are your highest priorities issues to get resolved, and this all plays into the trending and analytics capabilities as well that we highlighted. Where, hey, I might have some average benchmarks where we need to be resolving issues within 2 days, and you can start to see how you're doing over time. So it's just kind of bridging the gap between not only the how do we get started in purple teaming. I think that's one thing that we'll definitely want to highlight as we kind of finish up the conversation. Like, let's say I feel still a little overwhelmed, right? How do I get started? I'll let you answer that question. Then I can kind of maybe opine a little bit as well, and then we can see if we have any other questions we want to get to. So,
yeah, great. So if you haven't done any purple team engagements yet, if you haven't done any of these exercises, I mean, the problem is that this looks like a giant. And there is a lot you could do. I would say take it slow. Just pick one thing out of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and let's just take a look at what procedures you list there. You can go, George, I think, put the link to the Scythe community campaigns out there. They've got some great content you can use even if you don't have Scythe. You can pull the procedures out of there and run it. And I would say, like, just go slow. Just pick some basic something and just run it and just see what happens on your and think about first, like, what do I expect to happen when I go to run this thing? Then run it and see if that what you did was valid or not, right? I think that is don't get bogged up in the idea that you have to like have a mature thing from the first day you get started. That will never work. But I would pick something up like, I don't know, what do you think? My go-to, if you've never done any of this stuff before, is I would try to build any kind of command and control channel just to see, like, do we detect a beaconing of any kind? And then I would do some PowerShell activity as like my blanket statement. Like, go, another project that George is really active on is the C2 matrix. Go find, there's a bunch of open source free ones. Go find one, stand it up and just see, like, do we detect this, or does this work? Right. I mean, that is a really great way to get started.
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of was, as you were talking, I was kind of showing like, hey, Atomic Red Team is also a great resource.
Yep.
Right?
Agreed.
It comes with all the Atomic Red Team TTPs, but yeah, start small, right? And that's where I think that there's this maturity misconception or misnomer, right? Where it's like, you don't have to feel like, hey, we've gone through 5 years of penetration testing and now we can start purple teaming, right? You can start getting yourself into this proactive, continuous mindset very quickly. And so going in like I just showed, just starting like, hey, I'm just going to test one procedure, right? And so something like that. I think when I was a security director and we started getting going, we focused on like, okay, well, we kind of did a gut check. Where do we think our biggest gaps are, right? Like we've got the next gen everything. We got the next gen firewall, EDR. We've got the whatever. So where do we think our biggest gap might be? And so we were like, well, we have a little, a gut feeling like lateral movement, might be hard for us to detect. So we went and picked like 5 procedures out of the lateral movement tactic, right? And then we just tested them, right? And then we had some validation. Okay, like it's a scientific approach, right? Like we have a hypothesis, we go test it, and then we keep moving forward. So I think that's my recommendation, similar to yours. Just finding something that you think is where a gap might exist, and just start doing it, right? And you really do have to discipline the getting into that more proactive mindset, and you can do that today, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, we had several questions coming in. Hopefully we got through a lot of them. Ben, is there anything you'd like to kind of leave the audience with, and then we'll sign off, and we really thank people for taking some time.
Yeah, absolutely. We love discussing purple team stuff with the community. We're big fans of both PlexTrac and Scythe, and you'll probably see us bumping around with them and some other events. We host a lot of our own webinars. We've got one coming up. I think at this point it's next week or coming up later. If you can go to training.ondefend.com, one of our senior consultants, Joe Brinkley, is doing all about some advanced techniques. We run that usually once a month, and it's like real training. And then we show you how we've automated some of it in BlindSPOT. But it's really great, and there's lots of fun stuff that we do there. And don't be afraid to start purple teaming. It's a lot of fun. You get a lot of good benefit out of it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know from our end, if you signed up for this webinar, we're going to get you the access to the CyberRisk Alliance research report that we did on purple teaming. So you have access to that and can kind of start to use that as some fodder for maybe getting your purple team stood up. But also, I do want to highlight that we do package sales with PlexTrac and OnDefend, and even PlexTrac, OnDefend, and Scythe. So there's a great opportunity to take advantage to get yourself started if you come into the fold of our ecosystem. But obviously, we're here to promote the benefit of doing purple teaming exercises early and often, and really improving your security posture. With that, Angie, any last words?
No, just want to thank both of you for a great session, and the audience, all the attendees, for the great questions coming in. I guess a couple parting words. If you want to try a demo or you want to see a little more detail of PlexTrac, that's right on our homepage and all over our website. Ben, if somebody wants to engage with your team, see a demo, should they just go to ondefend.com? Where would you send them?
Yeah, ondefend.com has a lot of information on it, and you can contact us there. And if you just want an email, contact@ondefend.com. We'd love to chat with you. And obviously Dan and Angie and the team know how to reach us too. So definitely looking forward to chatting with you.
George reminded us in the chat, I'm hosting the Purple Team Roundup through the Wild West Hackin' Fest team. That is December 2nd. So we've got a great lineup of speakers. George will be on that. George is on that list. So that'll be a great day as well. So definitely make sure you go over there and sign up. George put it in the chat there. So, all right. Thanks. Angie, I'll let you close it out.
Yeah, thank you again. It was a great session, and appreciate everyone that attended, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ben. Have a good one.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you.